So we have with us Rabbi Yossie Denburg. Rabbi Yossie Denburg, tonight's title, as you've been listening, is the Rebbe, his love, his leadership, his legacy. The floor is yours.
First of all, thank you very much, Rabbi Pinny, for inviting me. A big yasher koach to Rabbi Shapiro, who is my teacher and is my teacher for about 45 years. I'm only 46. So he's been a teacher my entire life. It's an honor to share tonight's podium with him. And I'll start off with L'chaim Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Sha'akol Yivarech.
Amen.
First of all, it's great to see so many faces and names that I recognize. No one in particular. Hello to the Weisbergs. Hello to Ava Phillips. Hello to all the beautiful Jews that I do know and I don't know. Rabbi Shapiro and Rabbi Pinny spent the last half hour or so telling you about the Rebbe's global reach, how the entire universe was the Rebbe's vision, and how he touched all Jews, all non-Jews, and how the Rebbe touched presidents and kings and prime ministers. If you don't mind, and taking a step inward, I just want to share with you on a very personal level how it affected my life, how it continues to affect my life through the three words of your title tonight: the Rebbe's love, the Rebbe's leadership, and the Rebbe's legacy. And they're all one and the same. I was born in 1960. And in 1973 was my bar mitzvah year. And I had the occasion throughout the course of my life. I grew up in Montreal. My grandmother, my father's mother, lived in Crown Heights. We would go in very, very often, especially after my father's baby sister passed away, also lived in Crown Heights. We would go in very often. And throughout the course of my life, there were many occasions that my father had to go into the Rebbe, and we children were schlepped along. But I never went in for myself. I was always part of my family. And the year that I was becoming a bar mitzvah, my father made an appointment that I should have a private audience with Rebbe, just me and my dad. I was really nervous. I was nervous that the Rebbe was going to ask me questions that I certainly would not know the answer to. I thought I would be embarrassed. I thought I would fumble over words. But I was very proud at the same time that I was growing up and I was going to have my own private audience. And I shared that with my friends back in school in Montreal with my teacher, Rabbi Eisenbach, who was my teacher that year, 7th grade. And my teacher, whose family is from Israel, said to me, "That's great, you're going in for a private audience. Could you do me a personal favor?" And I said, "Of course. Would you be my emissary, my shliach, and ask the Rebbe for a bracha, a blessing, for my brother who is very sick and needs to have an operation," and on and on. So I wrote down the name of his brother and the mom's name. And that was one of the things that I literally said over like a mantra 1,001 times until it was etched in my memory. I didn't tell my father. I thought I was going to surprise my father. Here I am, this knacker. My father thinks I'm going in for X, only for brachas for myself. No, I want brachas, blessings for someone else. We came into the yechidus, we came into the private audience, and from the get-go, it was a disaster. That's the honest truth. The Rebbe asked me, when was my birthday? What day? And I told the Rebbe the date. And the Rebbe said, no, I meant the day of the week, not the date of the month. And I told the Rebbe Shabbos, and I already was sweating because I got the first question wrong. And that was a pretty easy question. And the Rebbe asked me if I gave tzedakah every single day. And then the Rebbe said, even on your birthday? And I said, of course. The Rebbe said, but it's going to be Shabbos. You just told me it's going to be Shabbos. So the Rebbe advised me that Friday, before my bar mitzvah, the Rebbe said, you should give whatever you normally give for Friday, what you would normally give for the next day because you can't Shabbos, and a third time because it's your birthday. And at the time, it truly did not dawn upon me the magnitude of what the Rebbe's attention to detail was. I just remember thinking, here is the greatest rabbi in the world, and I'm this 12-year-old pipsqueak, or as we say in Yiddish, a pisher, and here's the Rebbe is giving me personal advice on how I should prepare myself in light of my bar mitzvah, and I was just blown away. And then I said, okay, that I answer. I know I did learn it. And there's a great, let me ask you a question. And it got from bad to worse because the Rebbe asked me the question of the mimer, not a question on the mimer, the question that the mimer itself, the Hasidic discourse itself raises. Why is putting on tefillin in the morning the equivalent of learning an entire day? And my mind went blank. And I started to funfa. Is there anybody who speaks Yiddish over here? You know what the funfa means? Da, 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 da. I see Leon Weisberg says he knows what it means. Jerry Abraham, you know what the funfa means? Good. And I started to say some answer. It wasn't the correct answer. Started to just say over words from the mimer. My father was getting nervous that I wasn't performing. And finally, the Rebbe gave me a bracha. My father asked the Rebbe several questions that had to do with my father, his work, and his life. And the Yechidus was over, and we started to back out. And at that moment, also I remembered that I had to ask the Rebbe for a blessing for my teacher's sick brother in Eretz Yisrael. And I said to the Rebbe, my teacher asked me to ask for a bracha. And the Rebbe said, and what is his name? His full Hebrew name. And my mind just shut down. And I was just so overwhelmed. Honestly, I started to cry. I don't mean sobbing. I don't mean I lost it. I mean, I was just like sniffling, I guess. And I looked at my father like, please help me. You're my dad. And my father looked at me like, what do you want? You've never even told me that you were asked. And so I said the first stupid thing that came to my mind. I said to the Rebbe, Rabbi Eisenbach, the one from Israel. Now, it happens to be the Eisenbach family from Israel is huge, literally with many different cousins and different parts of the family. So saying Rabbi Eisenbach from Israel really narrowed it down to only about 400 people. But that's what I said to the Rebbe, the one from Eretz Yisrael. Here I is, 12 and a half, almost 13 years old. Ava Phillips, you know what the Rebbe said to me? He said to me in Yiddish, Zogim as ich kenem. Zogim, tell him that I know him. Most of our lives go by in a blur. Very rarely do we remember conversations. Most people can't even remember the promises that they made in the conversation. But then there are moments that you remember. This is neither of them. This is a moment that defined and continues to define my life. I still hear in my mind very often those words, Zogem azach kenem. And it's the Rebbe's call to me, tell yourself, Yossie Denburg, that I know who you are, I know where you are, I know what you are needed for today. The Rebbe drilled a hole in our conscience. Simply, not because, as Rabbi Shapiro said, of his onos, because of his genius in Torah study. I could not appreciate Torah study. I was not even 13 years old. Not because of his global reach. I was 13 years old. I wasn't worried about the Rebbe's global reach. And not because he spoke to presidents, because the Rebbe spoke to me. I wasn't shafted or shifted to some underling who handles 13-year-old boys, 13-year-old pipsqueaks. The Rebbe took out time from his day to speak to me. And so 40, 50 years later, when I get a phone call from a mom who says to me, could you speak to my rebellious teenager? No matter how tired I am, no matter how busy I am, I see the Rebbe sitting and talking to me, taking time to answer, to help, to lead, to direct, to guide, to inspire. And I say, the answer is yes. In fact, one of the lessons I've taken from that moment in time is that there are no accidents, and that if two Jews meet, and the Rebbe said this quite often, it was by divine providence. And the greatest result of that chance meeting, which is not by chance, is that a Jew somewhere else, a third Jew, should be helped. Call up any Chabad rabbi and say, I need help. And the Chabad rabbi is not going to ask you what you need. First, he's going to say yes. And then he's going to ask you what you need. The reason why we love the Rebbe is simply because the Rebbe loved us. The reason why we love Jews, because we are trying to emulate, after all these years, the Rebbe. Which goes from the first part of this talk, the Rebbe's love, to the Rebbe's leadership. By historical reality, the Rebbe's yahrzeit, the Rebbe's passing, is always commemorated this time of year when we read the story of Korach. In this portion of the rebellion of Korach, there are two other characters called in Hebrew Dasan and Aviram. They're brothers. We've come across them before. In fact, when Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, was still a prince in Israel, they were the ones who, trying to curry favor with the Egyptian Pharaoh, would mount an attack against Moses at the court, saying he deserves to be killed because he killed an Egyptian taskmaster. Moses runs for his life because of these two rebellious troublemaker Jews. Later on, those are the Jews that make trouble for Moses throughout his life. After the story of let's go back to Egypt, we don't want to stay here anymore. Let's appoint a new leader. Let's eat the mun. Let's go defy the rules of Shabbos. And in this week's Torah portion again, throughout the entire leadership of Moses, they are the biggest troublemakers in the world. And the most fascinating thing is that even after they've rejected Moses, accused him of being a killer, an authoritarian despot, Vayaka Moshe rises to try to appeal to them once more. And I am certain that people said to Moshe Rabbeinu, don't be naive, don't be a fool, don't waste your time, respect your own dignity. They have literally done everything to undermine your power. Why do you give them the time of day? And the truth is, I always think to myself, had Dasan and Aviram understood that the love that the Rebbe had for them, they never would have been a problem to Moshe. There was once a rabbi who led a verbal attack against the Rebbe's what he thought delusional and dangerous schemes to try to change the world. He attacked Lubavitch, and later when he got to recognize what Lubavitch was doing in his hometown, what the Rebbe was doing, he wrote a letter of apology to the Rebbe. I am sorry that I said all of the things I said against the Rebbe. I hope you don't carry a grudge. And the Rebbe wrote him back, believe you me, I don't have time for grudges. Do you know a person in this world who doesn't have time for a grudge? What do you say, Ralph? Do you know a Jew who doesn't know how to hold on to a grudge? The reason why the Rebbe was a leader that we trust, because he wanted nothing for himself and all for others. There was not one thing the Rebbe asked for that we give him. It's very fascinating that these days, as we prepare for Gimel Tammuz, tonight is Gimel Tammuz. there is a Maimer, a Hasidic discourse that we learn. And it talks about what the Rebbe does for us, and in return, what we do for our Rebbe. Most of you are parents, and I know you're all muted, but I'm going to share with you the conversation I've had with many, many parents. What is the greatest bracha, Hilda? What is the greatest bracha, Lenny, that we as parents want? And I know what you're going to answer. You're going to say, Yiddish Nachas. And that's the wrong answer. It sounds like it would be the right answer, but it's the wrong answer. The greatest bracha we could ask for, the greatest bracha we should ask for if we had half a brain, is that we should be better parents, more effective parents, more inspiring parents. That all of our kids all the time should say, Tati, you're amazing. Mommy, you're fantastic. You are the best role models in the world. You know what we could give the Rebbe? That bracha. We can say to the Rebbe, in terms of our own lives, you should be a more effective Rebbe when it comes to my life. Not I should think about you once a year on Gimel Tammuz. I should think about you every day. And as Rabbi Shapiro said, we should take time out of our day to emulate the Rebbe's love, the Rebbe's concern, the Rebbe's compassion for a 12-year-old, for a 10-year-old, for a 90-year-old. You don't got to change the world to be a Chabadnik. You only got to change yourself. Not so easy, I know. I've been trying for many years to change myself. And you know what I discovered? I can't. And then I discovered something even more profound. That you actually don't change anyone either because you gave a lecture. And I don't think anyone's life is going to be changed by my words tonight. But you know how you change someone's life? You invite them for a Shabbos meal. You know how you change someone's life? You help them get a pair of tefillin and teach them how to put it on. You know how to change someone's life? Not by telling them to change, by giving them opportunities so that they could grow and change. We talk about the Rebbe's love and the Rebbe's leadership. They're one and the same. How did the Rebbe lead? He led by love. It's very interesting. Post-World War II, many Hasidic Rebbes, many paragons of virtue, they said we must protect our young. And they built these walls, these ghettos, to keep out the riffraff, so to speak. The Rebbe tore down the walls. And the Rebbe invited every single Jew inside his camp. Every single Jew was a constituent of the Rebbe. You already are part of the party. You already belong. If you have a soul, you are in the Rebbe's camp. The Rebbe didn't take a stick and browbeat anybody. The Rebbe led with love. Just like Moses led with love, our Rebbe leads with love. Which brings me to the third part of tonight's title. The Rebbe's love, the Rebbe's leadership, and the Rebbe's legacy. Would you like to see the Rebbe's legacy? You see that top corner picture of Rabbi Pinny? That is the Rebbe's legacy. See Sharon Rosenthal? Hello, Sharon. Who on some level, at some point, did something more Jewish because of her connection to Lubavitch, because of the Rebbe. She is the Rebbe's legacy. When we live our lives with a little more love, a drop, and we do it in a leadership position selflessly, simply serving the other, we are the Rebbe's legacy. Not the books he left over, not the institutions he built, not the thousands of shluchim and the worldwide global campaign that he has. Each and every single one of us is the Rebbe's legacy. That's my story. I don't know what your story is, but I was at the Ohel this Monday, 2 days ago, and I met Jews from all over. And every single one of them is the walking legacy, the breathing legacy of the Rebbe. Fulfill your destiny, love a little more, lead a little more, and you'll leave your own legacy. Rabbi Pinny, thank you so much for inviting me. Everyone, a great Gimel Tammuz.